Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I am answering the most stupid question I ever conceived, that being how many flavors of juice can you make in Pikmin 3? For anyone who hasn't played the game, Pikmin 3's plot is that your planet is starving to death, so free explorers go to a distant planet called PNF 404, aka Earth, to find more food. Due to a meteor collision, you crash land at the beginning of the game, which destroys almost your entire food supply for the expedition. So in addition to bringing back seeds to grow more food back on Kopai, you also need to find various fruits on the planet to juice into your own personal food supply. To give an example of how the juicing process works, in the Garden of Hope you will find a sunseed berry or strawberry, which by picking up and bringing back to your ship, it will get turned into one canister of juice. This canister of juice will allow your party to survive for one day. With that being said, the goal of today's video is to figure out how many flavors of juice can be made in Pikmin 3, but before we get started, now's a good time for you to try to guess how many there are in the comments below. To give you a hint, despite there being 30 unique fruits in the game, there are more than 30 unique flavors of juice. Have you made your guess in the comments below yet? If so, thank you for feeding the YouTube algorithm engagement data. This video must reach the masses to educate them on Pikmin 3 juice. With that, let's begin answering the problem, but for that, we first need to understand what the problem actually is. In order to dissect the problem, I have 5 problem fruits to talk about, so let's start off with the fruit that is behind curtain number 1, the lemon. To tell you the truth, the face sprinkler is actually one of the most tame fruits in the challenge. I'm mainly bringing it up since it reveals why this is even a challenge in the first place. Just like the strawberry, the lemon gives us juice when we collect it. However, instead of giving us 1 canister of juice, it gives us 1.5. This means that aside from the full glass of lemon juice, there's also half a glass of juice left over. This extra half a glass will be mixed with the next fruit that is collected. So if, for instance, a strawberry was collected, you would get a lemon-strawberry mixture. It should also be noted that because of the pre-existing juice in the container when the strawberry was juiced, not all of the strawberry juice will fit in that container, meaning that there will now be an outstanding half a glass of strawberry juice that will mix with the next fruit. With this in mind, there are 30 unique flavors of juice that contain strawberries, 29 that include lemons but not strawberries, 28 that includes cherries but not the other fruits, and so on. This means by factoring in the lemon's problems, there are 465 flavors of juice, and that's just by looking at the first problematic fruit. Let's move on to the next one. In order to understand the next problem fruit, let's start off by talking about the stellar extrusion. The star fruit is honestly an unremarkable fruit, since it just gives us 2 canisters of juice. However, something interesting happens when we grab it. The star fruit splits in 2. While you're supposed to collect both halves at the same time, there's nothing preventing you from just getting half the fruit, getting only 1 canister of juice. For our purposes, we'll be looking at each star fruit half as its own unique fruit, at 1 canister of juice per half. While the splitting issue isn't that big of a deal most of the time, there are a couple of problems, the main one being the dawn pustles. The dawn pustles overall give us 1 canister of juice, which doesn't seem that bad, as if they split in half, that means we get 2 fruits that each give us half a canister each, which doesn't really change things from the lemons problem. But I never said that the dawn pustles split in half. No, unfortunately the dawn pustles do not split in half. This is because they are grapes. How many? 20 grapes. This means a set of dawn pustles is actually 20 fruits that each fill 1/20th of a canister of juice. To give an example of why this is bad, if we juice a grape followed by a strawberry, this is a unique juice. Alternatively, if we juice 2 grapes and then a strawberry, this is also a unique juice. Also, don't forget, a strawberry fills 1 complete canister, meaning if we start off with a grape, the strawberry will overflow. This means we can start with 1 grape and then a strawberry to overflow 1 grape worth of strawberry juice into the next canister, and then juice another grape, then juice a lemon to get a mixture of 1 part strawberry, 1 part grape, 18 parts lemon. For simplicity, I'll be treating a grape as a unit of measurement, so 1 grape gives 1 unit of juice, and the amount of juice needed to fill a canister is 20 units. Clearly the dawn pustles were pretty bad, but at the end of the day it could be worse. In fact, specifically at the end of the day it is worse, because I have only mentioned dawn pustles, when there are also dusk pustles. They didn't just put in 1 type of grape in this game, they put 2. The good news is that these grapes are essentially the same as their dawn counterparts, so we don't have many new problems. All this really means is that calculating this monstrosity of a problem is going to be even more of a headache. Anyway, no time for messing around. I don't even have enough time to go on a rant about how these grapes are technically identified as white and red grapes despite clearly being green and purple. No, instead now we need to talk about the third problem fruit, the Crimson Banquet. Just like the fruits before it, the watermelon breaks into parts. To be exact, it has a total juice of 60 units or free canisters, and it splits into 6 parts. This does not seem like that big of a deal at first, because it should just imply that we just have to count it as 6 fruits that give us 10 units of juice each, making it about as much of a problem as the cherries or raspberries in the game. Obviously, because I'm talking about it, this is not the case, and that's because how much juice each part of a watermelon gives you is, well, it depends. Fun fact, when something's juice amount is it depends, that is not good. To be exact, while the watermelon splits into 6 parts, they aren't all the same size, nor do they all give the same amount of juice. One piece gives 30 units of juice, 2 pieces give 10 units, 2 pieces give 4 units, and the smallest piece gives a measly 2 units. It is at this point that if you have any hope of calculating how many flavors of juice there are normally, to just give up. This is where I will say it is smart to start thinking about modeling this problem in a simulation. We aren't out of the woods yet, so let's talk about fruit number 4. Well, technically it's not a fruit, but a flavor, as I'm talking about spice. In Pikmin 3 Deluxe, the game's difficulty is selectable at the start of a game, and the hardest difficulty is Ultra Spicy. This difficulty changes a few things about the game, such as making Pikmin drown faster and only allowing 60 Pikmin on the field max. For us though, only one change is important. Every fruit only gives half as much juice. For our purposes, this means that our container size now holds 40 units of juice instead of 20, which in turn means that all of our math and simulations are going to be a lot more bloated. While this doesn't fundamentally change my strategy going forward, it does mean that I will need additional optimizations to be able to handle this new magnitude of juice. Because I don't actually own Pikmin 3 Deluxe to get footage, only the original game, and I don't want to overcomplicate my future explanations, unless otherwise mentioned, I'll be referring to containers with a capacity of 20 throughout the rest of the video. Our last fruit behind curtain number 5 is nothing. That's right, our 5th problem is literally nothing, as we need to take into account empty space when making the juices. After all, while a juice with 19 units of strawberry juice has the same flavor as one that has 20 units of strawberry juice, a juice that has 1 unit of grape juice and 19 units of strawberry juice is fundamentally different from a juice that has 1 unit of grape juice and 18 units of strawberry juice due to their different ratios. It should be noted that you can't actually drink partially empty canisters, but because they still stay in your inventory, I'm still going to say that they exist and they still count. With that covers all the problems we have to face while answering this question. Now that you know what you're up against, if you feel like that your initial guess on how many flavors there were was off, feel free to guess again with another comment. And with that, let's solve this juicy problem. Because I don't want the YouTube algorithm to bury this video, I'm not going to go into the extreme specifics of my code for the simulation I whipped up unless it's necessary. If you do want to see the inner machinations of my mind, a link to the code will be in the description. With that, let's get started. The way my simulation works is actually quite simple in concept, so let's start off with the basics. Essentially, I have a list of every fruit in the game, plus a fruit mimicking air. For simplicity's sake, let's say I have the following fruits: a mock bottom, a slapstick crescent, a juicy gaggle, and air. Obviously, this is not the full list, but it will make my upcoming explanation simpler. My program will start by selecting the mock bottom and give it the minimum juice amount of 1 unit. Even though the mock bottom gives 40 units of juice, I give the first fruit an automatic amount of 1 because it could be manipulated in a previous bottle by using grapes. Next, my simulation would add the banana, which has a juice amount of 50 units. This would make the total juice amount 51, which is over the capacity of a 20-unit canister of juice. So next, the juicing process begins. The program will create a juice that has 1 unit of peach juice and 19 units of banana. It will then check this juice against a list of all pre-existing juices to ensure that it's not a duplicate. If this juice is a duplicate, it will be tossed, otherwise it will be added to the list. Next, the program will try making another juice with more influence from the peach. This juice will have 2 units of peach juice and 18 units of banana juice. However, it can't be compared just yet. Before it can be compared, the juice needs to be compressed. This is because there is a common denominator in the units of juice. As such, the juice would be compressed into a 1-unit peach, 9-unit banana mixture. After that, the process continues until the peaches run with a value of 20, at which point the simulation will replace the last fruit with the next one in the list. In this case, the banana would be replaced with a raspberry. The raspberry has a juice amount of 10, bringing the current total up to 11. Because there is still space, a third fruit would be added, which in this case is the banana. This would bring the total up to 61. The program would attempt to juice the solution at various levels of peach concentrate, and then it would move on to the next combination, which would be peach, raspberry, and air. Even though I gave air a juice amount of 1, it has a special property of immediately ending off any juice. As such, the program will attempt to juice just a combination of peach and raspberry. Because air was the last fruit, the program would move back up a level and the raspberry would be replaced with air. The peach would be juiced singularly, and then the program would keep on cycling on. This would go on until the list of fruits was completely iterated through. So yeah, pretty simple and easy to understand, right? There is one little issue though, that being if you ran it as is, it would probably only finish after the heat death of the universe. This was only the base skeleton of this project. The real pain begins with optimizing it. Let's start the optimizations off easy, the first one being the so-called list of unique juices I mentioned. While a list of juices would work, it would also mean that every time a new juice was added, it would have to check the entire list to see if it already existed. Instead, I decided to use something more similar to a hash map. Looking back on it, I should have just used an actual hash map, but when I originally wrote this program a year ago, I didn't really know about them, so oh well. Anyways, what I decided to do was to have 4 nested arrays, and I would use them as essentially file directories. So if I had a peach-banana mixture, I just had to go into the peach array, then the banana array, then the air array, then one final air array. At this point, I would only have to compare my juice to any other juices in this specialized tiny array. For the next optimization, let's say I'm testing a peach-raspberry-banana mixture right after a peach-raspberry-Grape Problem mixture. While I could try both sequences of fruits 20 times for every level of peach juice inclusion, I instead keep track of the similar fruits and use that to lessen the amount. In this example, my program would run the first sequence 20 times and the second sequence 9 times. These 9 times would be when the amount of peach juice included was between and including 1 to 9 units. After that, the mixture will be entirely composed of peach and raspberry juice and a slapstick crescent will be entirely shut out. Because we already ran the peach-raspberry combinations when we had the peach-raspberry-mangosteen sequence, there's no reason to run them again. Let's move on to a juicier optimization, that being focus modes. Assume there is a fruit X. By doing this, every single juice in the game can be separated into 2 categories. Either they include fruit X or they don't. This may seem pretty obvious, but that means that if we find every juice that includes fruit X, we can essentially throw out the fruit and then run the simulation with 1 less fruit. This may seem counterintuitive, as by splitting up the juices like this, I will have to run my program at most 30 times. There are 2 main benefits to this though, the first being that specific optimizations only work when in a focus mode, and the second being is that if my computer crashes at any point, which it did by the way, or if I need to power it off, I will essentially have a checkpoint. I did mention focus modes plural, and that's because I also included a super focus mode alongside the normal focus mode that I already mentioned. I made it for basically the same reasons as the normal focus mode, and it works as basically an extrapolated version of it. What it means for the program to be run in super focus mode is that instead of having a requirement that all juices include a fruit X, it is that all juices include a fruit X and a fruit Y. This doubling up is nowhere near as useful as the initial benefits of the normal focus mode, but it still does help a bit. I did mention some optimizations are focus mode specific, so why don't we get a start on the most obvious of them? Let me ask you a question. Assuming we are focused on a slapstick crescent, which is a large fruit at a juice amount of 50 units, at what collection positions does the program need to test the fruit? A. When it is the first fruit in the glass, B. When it is the second fruit in the glass, C. When it is somewhere in the middle, or D. When it is the last fruit selected? The answer is A. We only have to check juices where the slapstick crescent is the first fruit in the bottle of juice. This is because if the slapstick crescent is not the first fruit collected, it is so large that it will fill any remaining space guaranteed, which means the juice can be flipped. Let's say for instance you have 1 unit of peach juice and 10 units of raspberry juice, and then finally a banana which fills the rest of the glass, adding 9 units. In this scenario, you could obtain the same result by just starting with 9 units of banana juice, getting a juicy gaggle, and then getting the mock bottom which will fill the remaining unit of juice. A similar technique can be used with smaller focus fruits like juicy gaggles to a lesser degree. If the focus fruit is not currently selected and adding it to the selection would cause the juice to fill or overflow even if the first fruit is at its minimum amount, that means that adding the fruit would make the juice full with the last fruit being the focus fruit, which means the juice's collection order can just be flipped like the larger fruit. Again, this isn't quite as powerful because smaller fruits can hide in the middle of juices, but it is still an improvement. That optimization was a little tricky, so let's take a break with an easier one. Let's say I have 3 juicy gaggles. I could collect them in any order and get the same flavors. Normally, my program would try all 6 different ways of collecting them, that being ABC, ACB, BAC, BCA, CAB, and CBA. The easy optimization I made is that if a fruit has a duplicate during the selection phase, the last duplicate is chosen. So for instance, in this scenario, when choosing the first juicy gaggle, it would see the duplicates and jump over A and B and immediately make the first fruit in the selected fruits list raspberry C. It would then move on to the next raspberry selected B, and then the last one A. This means the first selection would be CBA, and this would also be the last one selected. I can't avoid it anymore, it's time to talk about grapes. In order to understand the following optimizations, we first need to understand why permutations matter. Obviously, it's because of overflow. For example, if you get a Dawn Pustle, then a raspberry, and then finally a Cupid's Grenade, you'll get a mixture that is 1 unit grape, 10 units raspberry, and 9 units cherry. If you were to flip the order of the Juicy Gaggle and the Cupid's Grenade, you would end up with a mixture that is 1 unit grape, 10 units cherry, and then 9 units raspberry. While it would make sense for this exact problem to affect a series of red and white grapes, it actually doesn't, and this is because unlike every other fruit, the grape can never overflow because it is the smallest fruit at 1 unit. That means if a grape does overflow, it is not a part of a mixture at all. Let's use an example where we have 17 units of peach juice and a sequence of free grapes. Prior to the optimization, my program would attempt to run each permutation of grape flavors, so it would run the following 8 combinations: red, 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 white, red, white, red, red, white, 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 red, red, white, red, white, 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 red, and white, white, white. In terms of unique juices created in this scenario, there were 4 unique ones: either free red grapes, 2 red, 1 white, 1 red, 2 white, and free white. While this technically works, for every grape sequence, or as I call it, every grapevine that you make, you have a big O of 2 to the power of n permutations, which you have to run, which is not very effective, especially since the optimization makes each grapevine get down to a big O of n permutations, which, for people who don't know, is a way of saying it is a very good optimization. But what is this optimization I keep talking about? Well, instead of running every permutation of grapes in a grapevine, we only run a permutation that doesn't have the same grape density as a previous iteration. So we would run or skip the following vines in the last example. We would run red, 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 run red, red, white, skip red, white, red since it's the same as the last one, run red, white, white, skip white, red, red because it's the same as the second vine, skip white, red, white because it's the same as the third valid vine, skip white, white, red for the same reason, and run white, white, white. These 4 vines would cover all 4 of the possible juice combinations in this example, and it doesn't risk missing anything if it gets cut off. Say for example the amount of peach juice was up to 18 units. In this case, the first vine would create the 2 units of red grape mixture, the third vine would create the 1 of each mixture, and then the last vine would create the 2 units of white grape mixture. To drive the point home, if the peach contents were up to 19 units instead, the first vine would still cover the 1 unit of red grape since the first grape present in the vine is red, and the last vine would cover the 1 unit of white grape mixture since the first grape present in the vine is white. The watermelon can also kind of use this optimization, because if a series of watermelon chunks appear in a sequence as their own vine of sorts, if a different permutation shows up again that includes the same chunks, you can essentially just treat it as one big piece of watermelon. And if we treat it as one weird big fruit, running a different permutation is just the same as running a duplicate. That grape optimization was the second biggest optimization in my entire program. I say this because it actually let me run the program. Up to this point, I literally could not run the program with the actual dataset because it just wasn't fast enough. I spent over a month in the routine that I would make an optimization, I would test it against a small dataset to make sure my optimization actually worked and it did not cause any unexpected results or have any bugs, fix said bugs, and then get it working. Then I would start it on the full dataset in super focus mode. In the 2 days or so I would let it run, it would make negligible progress, and I would think of another optimization. I would feel like implementing the optimization and throwing out any progress that the dataset made would be more efficient than letting my program spin its wheels. Then I would stop the program and do it all again. This is what I did for about a month, until this grape optimization allowed the program to finish in super focused mode for the first time. From here, I ran it about 25 more times in super focus mode and one last time in focus mode, which gave me every juice in the game that included the Wayward Moon. Just because the program was running now doesn't mean it was fast. Tallying up all the time it took to get the juices that included the Wayward Moon, it took 2 weeks of just running the program to get that one fruit completed. And it was at this point that I decided to add one final optimization. And after doing it, I ran that Wayward Moon again, entirely in focus mode. And with this godly optimization in hand, that previously 2-week process was done in 20 minutes. This optimization was easily the craziest for me since it cut off so much time from the simulation, but what was the actual optimization? Well, let me ask you a question. Where does a grapevine need to start if grapes are not the currently focused fruit? A, when it's the first fruit in the glass, B, when it's the second fruit in the glass, C, when it's somewhere in the middle, or D, when it is the last fruit selected? The answer is B, and I'll prove it by contradiction. If a grapevine starts in the middle and ends before the end of a juice, there is nothing preventing you from swapping the grapevine's position with the second fruit collected. If we take 1 unit of peach juice followed by a juicy gaggle, followed by 5 grapes, there is nothing stopping us from instead getting the 1 unit of peach juice, then the 5 grapes, and then the juicy gaggle. Next, if the grapevine is overflowing, we can swap a cropped version of the vine with the second fruit. Looking back on the last example, assuming that there are now 6 units of peach juice instead of just 1, if we were to take 6 units of peach juice, a juicy gaggle, followed by 5 grapes, we could alternatively get the same mixture by getting the 6 units of peach juice, followed by 4 grapes, and then the juicy gaggle. Lastly, we don't care when grapes are the first fruit because there is already another fruit being focused on. Assuming we have 19 grapes and 1 unit of peach juice with the peach being the focus fruit, there is nothing stopping us from just swapping the position of the grapevine and the peach. With this last optimization, I was finally able to fill out my spreadsheet, and I was finally able to figure out the answer to the question I posed at the beginning of the video. So how many flavors of juice are there in Pikmin 3? Now's your chance to see how close you were to the right answer, because without further ado, the number of unique flavors of juice in Pikmin 3 is 59,592,646. Kind of. While I personally believe that there are 59,592,646 flavors of juice, you could argue that there are up to 2 more. First, you could argue that you start the game with 3 containers of blue juice, which could count as its own flavor. However, because you didn't actually make the juice and you have no way of making the juice, I personally didn't count them. The second flavor is nothing. Is a bottle of air with no juice in it its own flavor of juice? I don't think so, because for juice to have a flavor of something, there needs to be juice to have a flavor. That does it though. I now only have one question left to answer. Why? Why the hell did I do this to myself? I don't know, I was bored. But with that, I'd like to say thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye!